New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Guided selling from RingDNA makes your entire sales team more effective by revealing exactly what reps should do and when to do it. Guided selling works by transforming sales data into a curated list of prioritized sales actions. So when reps start their day, they'll never again wonder which prospects and accounts or hot inbound leads to reach out to next. Guided selling even shifts reps' priority in response to real-time buying signals. Finally, even new reps can sell like seasoned ones. Let RingDNA be your guide to success. Learn more at ringdna.com/guided selling. That's ringdna.com/guided selling. It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 722 of Accelerate. That is episode number 722 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. So I have another excellent episode lined up for you today. My guest today for you is Dennis Brown. Now, Dennis is the founder of the Linked Academy and the host of the Growth Experts podcast, as well as author of the book, The Ultimate Guide to Generating Inbound Leads with LinkedIn. And I think Dennis was saying he generated 3,800 inbound leads last year for his services and products on LinkedIn. So he is truly one of the experts on using LinkedIn as a sales tool. And in today's discussion, we'll be getting into some really practical and valuable strategies that you can put to use in your selling on LinkedIn. We're going to start early on by getting into sort of the 2 problematic approaches Dennis sees salespeople using on LinkedIn, which is, first of all, treating it like a speed dating app, which I think we've all personally experienced, as well as failing to create valuable content that attracts the attention of their potential buyers. So we're going to get into why you need to build a network of relationships, not transactions, why you need to share content that's useful and valuable and compelling to people in your network so that they will engage when they find value in it, when they want to look at your profile to learn more and then reach out to you, connect with you and say, hey, perhaps there's an opportunity to do business here. Now, before we get to Dennis, I want to take a quick second to talk about the Sales House. It is the sales performance accelerator for B2B sellers. Now, in the typical sales training, you learn a lot of things, process, methodology, but what I see is missing is you don't learn how to win. I mean, in sales, winning an order is not the result of your process or the methodology you use. It comes from executing a lot of small things savagely well. So in the Sales House, we focus on teaching you the behaviors and the skills that you don't learn in sales training, these essential skills that make the huge difference in your ability to win new deals. So if you're not up to speed on these skills, then you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage, and the Sales House is the resource you need to reach the next level, as well as the level above that. So come learn how to sell with more confidence, trust, and value. Visit thesaleshouse.com. That is thesaleshouse.com. All right, let's jump into it. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. So you're joining us from where today?
I live just outside of Buffalo, New York, a little suburb called Clarence, New York. I've been here for, lifelong resident here in Western New York.
So winter is just about to start.
You got jokes, right? You got jokes. No, believe it or not, it did snow.
The joke is we're recording this in April. And
yeah.
We're talking short summers.
It's May 2nd, and it snowed a week ago.
Yeah.
We had light snow. It didn't stick, of course, but I mean, we literally had snow. And it's so funny because my wife is like a creature of the weather. Her moods are determined by I don't know, by the lunar cycles or by the tides or by snow. So it's one of those deals. It's crazy around here. You don't know what you're going to get, but it does have some nice seasons, and this is where we live. So gotta own it.
It's funny. I have a lot of friends from Buffalo.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. But they're all California residents. I mean, it
so they wait a minute. They lived in California and they came to Buffalo voluntarily?
No. Vice versa. They all, quote unquote, escaped.
I was going to say that doesn't happen. That's like the reverse of what happens, right? They were born in Cheektowaga or Amherst, and they moved away because they were like, oh, screw this snow.
Yeah. Well, there's a big series of friends here in California that's just like, where are you from? Oh, grew up in Buffalo. It's like,
there's
and
a
after
lot
a while, I just
Buffalo.
I would say, you're from Buffalo, right?
A lot of warm places. A lot of people from Buffalo and Vegas. A lot of people from Buffalo and Florida. A lot of people from Buffalo and California and Arizona. So
and still
it's no accident.
rabid Bills fans or rabid Sabres fans, whatever. So
yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we're going to talk about LinkedIn and using LinkedIn for sales. But before we do that, is I'd written a post in the last couple of days about reacting to some sales expert online saying that, what should you do when the buyers aren't being fair to you? And I didn't react well to that. But it's sort of funny is then I looked on your LinkedIn feed and you had this video from Bill Gates or about Bill Gates, sort of 11 lessons he taught his daughter, 11 rules you never learn in school. And one of the first ones is life isn't fair. And it seems weird that we have to reinforce that lesson.
Yeah, it's like a forgotten lesson, right? I mean, I remember as a child, my grandparents and my parents instilling that into me, whether I was unique or not, from an early age. Life isn't fair.
In our case, life isn't easy or fair.
Right.
But make the best of it.
That's right. Sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield, right?
Well, we all go through those phases. I've been both, right?
Yeah, me too.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting too in the 11 rules from Bill Gates is you had your favorites, and I liked those as well. But the one that I like is your school may have done away with winners and losers, life hasn't. And I think that's really sort of striking for me. And we're in some similar groups on LinkedIn, and we see a lot of the same content and know a lot of the same people. But it really struck me in the last year or two that there's a lot less talk about winning these days, right? We talk about sales, and we talk about the process, and we're going to talk about closing, and we're going to do these steps, but people don't talk about winning. And it's almost like, okay, what's going on here? I mean, you can't get orders unless you win, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I take this back, I have two young daughters, right? One's 10, one's 13. And if I bring this back to, kind of the real world, even outside of business, it's one of those things where participation trophies have become the big fad, particularly over the last 10 or 15 years, right?
Oh,
and
longer.
And so, I'm sorry?
Longer, yeah, but...
Yeah, longer. I mean, but for me, that's where I've noticed it, right? Mm-hmm. Because of my kids and it's one of those things where I guess it probably it could transcend into their later life. And that's one of the fears. And so, in business, obviously, when you're in a sales situation, no one likes to think of a winner and a loser, but the fact is there is. I mean, your competition either beats you for one reason or another, or you beat them because you got the order, right? You got the deal. You got the opportunity to do business with that client for however long you can provide enough value to keep them, right? But there is a winner and a loser in every sale and every order, right? And every deal. So, I don't know why people would shy away from it. But I think it probably has something to do with that whole context that we started with, of nobody wants to face the facts that the world is not always easy or fair.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure as you have as well. I've gone through business for decades, and yeah, I could write chapter and verse about instances where the buyer wasn't quote unquote fair to me, but I didn't expect fairness, right? I expected I had to earn the fairness as opposed to being bequeathed fairness. And I think this is something that, I don't know, maybe people are becoming so reliant on thinking sort of through the technology and how technology can take the place of humans in the selling processes that they don't think about it necessarily in as stark of terms as they need to. And yeah, sales is fundamentally a zero-sum game.
Yeah. One thing that I think that where people focus in around this, where they're asking for fairness, is in regards to price, right? And I think a lot of the conversations that I've heard, at least in regards to fairness, go to price. And here's always been my philosophy. And this is how, and right, wrong, or indifferent, this is how I've approached sales, because I've been in businesses that are very much commoditized, and price is a topic that's always talked about. And I've been in other businesses where it was very unique. And, price wasn't an early conversation because it was such a unique value proposition. And I can tell you that in my personal opinion, and just from my personal experience, what I've adopted is trying to introduce the fact that I'm not ever the cheapest. And some of the times I'm even more expensive than the rest of the people. But here's why. And so I try to introduce that very early, because what I want to do is I want to get those people out of my pipeline as early as I can, right? Because if they come back to me and they say, well, we're really looking for, the cheapest. Well, I'm definitely not your guy. And I
have that conversation early. Yeah. I
have that conversation early. I exit stage left as quickly as I can in that process. Because I know that if we're talking about it in the first 2 or 3 conversations, I know it's only going to get worse on the back end, and we're going to have 20 conversations about it later. And I'm just not going to be that guy. It's never been part of me. Well, I have to say, I lied. When I was a earlier salesperson, entrepreneur,
sure,
I would do whatever I had to do to get the deal, even if I didn't make money, which was stupid. But I flipped the switch and realized that, I found enough confidence in the value that I could provide that I said, listen, I'm not going to be the cheapest guy. If that's the number one ingredient that you're looking for in this relationship, then I'm probably not your guy. And if they kept talking to me at that point, I realized that they were looking for value and price, right? So I was okay with that.
Yeah, I wrote an article a number of years ago, and actually I'm going to bring it back to life here shortly. It's on my list of things to revise. But and the title was and the title was, and I sincerely believe this, is you can't get a price objection from a qualified prospect. That speaks to your point exactly. If you've really qualified them early and disqualified the ones where the price is the issue, you can't have a price objection from a qualified prospect. By definition, they're not qualified if they're objecting to your price.
Yeah, good point. And I that's well said. That's a much more concise way of saying it than my long rant.
I'm older. I've had more time to think about it. So
yeah. So thank you for that. But that does make total sense.
Yeah. I mean, think about that in that context is, you have to qualify and price early in the deal, to your point. Because if there's a big disconnect, if you're premium priced, if you're selling high value, and they just aren't going to go for it, you want to surface that early because you don't want to invest your time in them. They're just not going to buy from you. And that's okay. Yeah, I wrote about this week in a post is, my rule, which is it's a big world. And there's always willing prospects out there. So rather than waste your time on those who are not a good prospect, go out and find one that is.
Yeah, 100%. I had one of my last businesses that I started back in 2003 grew and then later sold in 2016. We were in the logistics transportation space. And if you know anything about that space,
no.
When you rate freight, okay, when you create a freight rate, it goes on a per mile basis, and you can win and lose deals on cents per mile.
Sure.
Okay. It's crazy. Like, it's a very nickel and dime business. It's a high volume, low margin business. And, and so a lot of people play that game. Some of the bigger companies play the Walmart version where they're doing it all on volume. and I hear a lot of people in the industry have come to me and said, well, listen, I can't be cheaper than XYZ. I said, well, don't be then.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find the prospects that aren't focused on you being the cheapest. And then you need to connect with them. But it's harder. It's definitely harder. It takes a little bit more time, or you have to take a different approach. But ultimately, that's where I really honed the skill of pre-qualifying my prospects very early in those conversations, because they appreciated it as well. I mean, I had people that thanked me, right? Because they didn't have to go through the process of, several weeks or a month or whatever of this whole due diligence process. And they had marching orders from their boss that said, listen, we're looking for this. And if it doesn't meet this, then we can't do it. And they appreciated the fact that I self-selected out, and it saved both of us a whole lot of time.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of a lost message for many sellers, because, and I wrote about that this morning in my daily newsletter, is you have to be proactive at decluttering. I call it decluttering your pipeline.
Yep.
And otherwise, if you just want to, if your whole emphasis, and unfortunately we're seeing more of this emphasis in sales, which is on managers sort of evaluating the performance of their salespeople, and corporate leaders evaluating the performance of their sales managers based on the size of their pipeline, which is, through all experience that I've had, is antithetical to high productivity, because you're just wasting time on by necessity, you're wasting time on deals that are never going to cross the finish line.
Yeah, you're putting just a bunch of dead wood into the pipeline just to check the box, and it doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve the company, doesn't serve the manager that's trying to manage the overall deal flow. It doesn't serve the salesperson or the client. So it doesn't serve anybody and they're not one stakeholder in that equation is served beneficially.
Yeah, except maybe, a CEO or a board member that wants to look at a report and say, oh, good, we got a good pipeline.
Yeah, but it doesn't translate,
No,
right?
It doesn't translate, right?
It's a false sense of security, right? It's the whoopee that doesn't keep you warm, right? I mean,
it is your security blanket, yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't do anything for you. So, no, it's a great point. And I'm not a sales trainer. Don't get me wrong. That's not my forte. That's not what I do. But
I'm not
I see it myself with clients that I work with, their sales teams, and I see that emphasis, and I see the technology showing that emphasis on pipeline, and I see a lot of drivers that are pushing that, continuing to push that agenda, push that that metrics.
All right, well, let's jump in to talk about LinkedIn, because that's a good segue there. Because cool. Because you're an expert in that, in terms of developing new business through LinkedIn, is. Yeah, I believe that one of the reasons we have this emphasis on big pipelines is now we have sort of in this golden age of sales technology. We've got these great tools out there that enable sort of mass outreach, quote unquote personalization at scale, which is a little bit of an oxymoron, but nonetheless. And you sort of contrast that with LinkedIn, which is sort of a one-by-one type methodology, right? One person at a time, though you can scale it some, but yeah, it's a different approach. And I think part of the reason that we've got this emphasis on big pipelines is because you can generate big pipelines more easily now than you could in the past. Unfortunately, it's resulting in dramatically lower win rates, but nonetheless. Right. So let's start looking at the sort of the challenges for salespeople and using LinkedIn now in this environment to develop new leads, new opportunities, because you've certainly experienced it. I'm sure I've experienced it. A day doesn't go by where somebody wants to connect with me to pitch me, basically, the most common complaint. So, yep. How do you successfully operate as a salesperson in that environment to use LinkedIn effectively?
Well, I think you pointed out a really good and compelling, observation, which is the problem. There's two big problems that I see with salespeople leveraging LinkedIn to generate, some leads and sales, right? One is they treat it like they're speed dating, right? They think it's Tinder, swipe right, and they're just moving, and they're just trying to play the numbers game. And they're in a hurry, and they push too hard, too fast. And, in my opinion, you're going to alienate way too many people, and you're going to work way too hard to try to generate just a small number of leads, right? If they take a little bit longer term approach and they focus on, they pre-qualify and scrub the people that they are connecting with, to make sure that, number one, they meet the right, the customer avatar, the perfect prospect profile, that they're in the right industry, the right, company size, the right title, the right, all they've checked all those boxes and they're only spending time with the right people. Once they've done that, they have to invest. And, that investment is no different than if you were to meet somebody at a trade show or a conference. And you're not going to beat them over the head with your pitch at the trade show or the conference, right? You want them to know what you do.
You shouldn't, but they do. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you want them to know what you do. You want to develop some relationship, a basic rapport and relationship with them. And then you're willing to, develop that over time. But if you're expecting that to immediately turn into deal flow or be a part of your pipeline, it's just not going to happen. It doesn't work that way, right? I mean, for a couple of reasons. Number one, you just haven't invested enough time to build that trust, right? Second of all, there's a whole bunch of other people that are trying to do the same thing. It used to be cold calling, right? Everybody would smile and dial, and now people don't pick up the phone, right? And now people are trying to translate cold calling into emailing or through LinkedIn. So, I think you just have to slow down the process and focus more on the relationship than the transaction. And that takes time, and people don't like that. That's the reason why lotteries are so successful in every state in the United States, right? That's why you have millions and millions of dollars invested. People have put $1 and a dream into lotteries because they want immediate gratification. And I'm sure there's people that over the last 30 or 40 years that if they had saved the money and invested the money they had put into lotteries, they'd probably have close to $1 million. But they weren't willing to do that. So that's number one. And then the second one is, and this is the one that's really come to my attention in the last couple of years in particular, is salespeople, whether it be the company or the salesperson, they don't have a lot of good direction on creating content. Okay. So you have a lot of companies.
A lot of companies don't want their salespeople to create content. That's
right. A lot of companies don't want their salespeople to create content. They want them, there's a very strict protocol. And on LinkedIn, as you know, there's basically 3 ways to generate leads and clients through LinkedIn. You got paid ads, which is obviously a whole different animal, right? That's not a salesperson driven, focus. You got outreach, which is what we're talking about, where they do outreach to targeted, profiles and people that are on LinkedIn. And then you got inbound. And the inbound, that's where the content comes in, right? You know that. I mean, you create a lot of content, a lot of great content on LinkedIn. People engage with that. And some of them turn into conversations, right? Some of them will ask you a question and eventually turn into a conversation. Some of those will be better qualified than others. But ultimately, it's a way for you to generate inbound leads. Now, personally, in 2018, because of the strategy I've taken for my own business and that I help and teach other people with in their business, is I generated over 3,500 inbound leads with LinkedIn. So I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm just saying it to let you know that it works, right?
I'm
no different than any salesperson.
Just so you know, I am impressed.
Yeah, I mean, I generated that many inbound leads. Those are people that raise their hand and say, "Hey, Dennis, can you help me with this?" Right? And so a lot of them were not heavily qualified, so you got to have a filter. But I think if salespeople were able to have an easy way or a framework to create content, and I don't want them to spend 20 hours a week creating content, but I don't think you need to. There's some easy ways that you can create content without actually, doing a whole lot of work, like curating content, right? You can use other people's content, images, videos. You gave a perfect example, right? That Bill Gates video, the 11 lessons that you never learn in school. I didn't create that video.
Yeah, I know.
I leveraged the video that they created, and it ended up getting thousands of views, and it ended up getting hundreds of engagements. Now, that's not a perfect example because that's not content that's heavily oriented towards a specific, towards my specific market. But if that was a video about X, then it could have had the same impact. Do you get my point?
No matter where your sales team is working from, RingDNA can enable them to be more productive and effective. RingDNA offers a complete platform for remote sales teams that gives reps the tools they need to connect with more prospects and create more opportunities and drive more revenue no matter where they're working from. And managers can get real-time insight they need to coach reps to success. Win more deals from anywhere on the planet with RingDNA. Learn more about how RingDNA helps remote teams at ringdna.com/remote work. That's ringdna.com/remote work.
New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Oh yeah, no, I'm sure that people listening did as well, because I think that, just to clarify, is that first step you talked about in terms of connecting and finding the right people and so on, is I think the mindset that sellers don't have is they have to change away from the transactional to, and I love what, you ever read Keith Ferrazzi, any of his books?
I haven't.
You should, you'll love it. And he's Never Eat Lunch Alone and books like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So I didn't recognize the name, but Never Eat Lunch Alone. Yep.
So he talks about the fact that you, as in your career, your network has value, right? It's an asset that you need to develop.
Absolutely.
And so rather than looking at these connections that you make with people as something that's transactional, that I'm going to connect and thus it has to turn into some action, it's, well, first I'm building this network that I don't know how I'm going to monetize it eventually, but I'm creating these relationships and these contacts with people that in some has value. So my next step is how do I then begin to use that in a way to extract some of the value from that? And that is, well, yeah, to your point, is I'm going to start sharing content and something that's useful and valuable to, it could be curation, it could be creating something to those people in my network that, you know, they're going to teach them this idea that if I share something or I create something, they're going to say, yeah, it's worth my time to engage with that because, you know, that's valuable, right? That has some value to me in my day-to-day world. And this is the mindset for me that sellers need to get into on LinkedIn, is to take responsibility in sort of 2 ways. One is long-term vision on the network, and secondly is, and this is the controversial one, is they have to have a point of view. And the point of view is what's represented in the content you share or comment on or create, or the conversations you get into online, that when you do contact somebody and they say, oh, because I get contacted by a salesperson, first thing I do is look at the LinkedIn profile.
Right.
100% of the time. And I want to know who they are and what they care about. And that can be the difference between you connecting with someone in a way to get business, if you have, like I said, a point of view is how I summarize it, as opposed to the person who's got, you know, a crappy little picture and no point of view.
Yeah, for sure. To go back to the beginning where you talked about, I think it was Harvey McKay that coined the phrase, dig your well before you're thirsty. Right. I think he wrote that book, and that, you know, investing, you know, in that before you need it. And the problem is that everybody wants it today, right? They want to sign up on LinkedIn. They want to put a basic profile together, and they want everybody to just start reaching out to them and thinking they're going to get deals. And it doesn't work that way. Or they're going to just start spamming a whole bunch of people and think that that's going to convert into deal flow. And it doesn't.
Well, and
we all know that.
Right. But as a seller, you have to look at LinkedIn as a career asset, not a job asset.
That's right.
And so the network you're building is an asset for the duration of your career, unless LinkedIn goes away, which I guess is always possible. But assuming it's here for the next several decades, this network you build has value. And so it's not, geez, I need a ROI on the time I spend on LinkedIn today. It's what's the ROI I get over the time and effort I invest into it over the length of my career. And
But that's the long view, right? That's the hard part, right?
That's the way you have to
where
use it,
everybody
though.
struggles, is to play the long game. And the fact is even if LinkedIn did go away, the relationships that you converted from digital into the real world don't go away, right? Those people who end up in your Rolodex, who you end up having a meeting with or have a phone call with. I mean, you and I met through LinkedIn, right? That was how we first engaged with one another. And now we have an offline relationship. So if LinkedIn went away, we still could do business together, have conversations, provide value, collaborate, whatever we do. You were on my podcast, the Growth Expert podcast. I appreciate that. And then, part of this was you thought that I might be a good fit for your audience. And now we're here. So, but that all started from LinkedIn. But that's because you and I both took a long view to the process. And now we have a relationship where if I called you or you called me, within 24 hours, we'd get a return phone call.
Well, I think this is an issue because I've had other LinkedIn experts on the show and talk about how salespeople should use LinkedIn. And again, it's all transactional. And I know that plays to the, sort of the immediate appeal to salespeople is, if I want to invest time in this, I want to get something out of it right away. And I'm just telling people who are listening to it is you have to change your mindset about LinkedIn because this LinkedIn it's a long-term play. You may get some short-term business out of it. But I tell you, I mean, the people that, and I've had this several times over the last couple of months, I've sort of reached a breaking point sometimes with people who I think should know better, who reach out to me and like there's a guy who reached out to me and said, have you ever thought of starting a podcast? And we work with this person, and I looked at your profile, and you'd be a great candidate to have a podcast. And so I wrote back to him, and I said, well, here's the deal. Did you really look at my profile? Because, I've got perhaps the top-rated sales podcast was over 700 episodes.
Right.
You spent a minute, you would have found that out. And I said,
it's so funny because that I had a mirror situation to that in the last 2 weeks where a LinkedIn expert reached out to me and said, hey, listen, I think you'd be a good candidate for our LinkedIn marketing services, right? Something to that effect. And I literally chuckled. Normally, I would light that person on fire, right? I would light them up because sometimes my tolerance is low, right?
Yeah,
sometimes I have zero tolerance.
Usually I ignore, but occasionally, yes, I feel compelled to respond.
This time I replied back to him and I said, are you serious? And question mark. And he replied back and he goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Right. So, I let it go and, he was apologetic and whatever, but that's the challenge with automation on LinkedIn, right? There are these SaaS companies and Google Chrome applications that people are putting together to try to automate this whole process on LinkedIn. And while that seems fantastic, right? It seems like it would make things a lot easier. There's two big problems with it. Number one, LinkedIn doesn't want it. It's a definite violation of their terms of service, and they get pissed every single time they find one of those companies and they're going to try to shut them down. Now, sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. They've been successful multiple times. And so if you want to jeopardize your account, that automation piece, you have to be very, very, very careful. Now, I'm going to be dead honest and tell you that a couple of years ago, I tried some of those things. I did try them because I wanted to see what they were all about. I mean, I can't cast, scorn on something that I didn't actually try. So I tried it for a very short period of time. And I realized it was like a drug, right? It was like, oh my gosh, I can get all these messages out. But I realized the backlash from the users that were upset about, getting beat over the head with automation, and then LinkedIn themselves, I realized that it was just, it wasn't the way to go, right? So I knew that it wasn't, I reinforced it and I put it to the side because I would never put my clients in that situation. So I think some of the people that are transactional are really focused on that automation piece, just like in any marketing automation. But there's a good and bad way to automate. And, me personally, that's not my approach. That's not my style. I would never put my clients in jeopardy. I would never put my own account in jeopardy because ultimately you don't own your LinkedIn account. LinkedIn can take it away at any time they want.
Right. Well, it is one of the sort of the ironies, if you will, is that salespeople complain about the negative stereotypes about salespeople, and yet we're continually leaping, sort of a class of people leaping to use these tools that just continue to reinforce that bad image, right? Because of the way we message people and connect with them.
Yep.
And I'm sort of like you. As I reach my limit at some point, I try to actually I respond to one guy, and I sort of start. I said, he was sort of a well-known guy, clearly had outsourced this to somebody. But same thing as they talk about, Andy as a new business consultant and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, I've been in business as a consultant for 20 years,
Yep. 2
best-selling books, the podcast, blah, 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 blah. And so I wrote back to him. I said, don't want to come across as sort of a dick, but I mean, and I use those words. I said, but, just spend even a minute doing this. And I said, I understand maybe you outsource this. So, did you do any quality control? I mean, this is a person that writes about the negative image of salespeople. And I said, look what you're doing.
Yep. For sure. No, totally agree. And, it's definitely a pet peeve of mine, and I've grown a little bit more tolerant to it. But me, I immediately disconnect from those people, and, and I just set it aside. And obviously I have my own strategies and tactics that have worked for years and have worked for my clients. And this seems to be that they're very similar to your type of approach. So, I think everybody has their styles. It is what it is. But I think that you're going to do way more damage taking that shotgun approach than you will with taking a slower, more targeted approach.
Okay. So we're sort of winding down time-wise. So time's gone very quickly. Question is, so what do you see as sort of the 2 big changes that are coming to LinkedIn, let's say, over the next year? And what are the impact for sellers? Or what are the things that have just recently been introduced that sellers should be embracing that they're not?
So there's a couple of things, there's a whole bunch of things I could talk about. But there's 2 things I want to talk about that are really top of mind for me. One is LinkedIn is launching, a couple of years ago, they launched LinkedIn native video where you could upload video. Prior to that, you could only, use YouTube or Vimeo or third-party applications. You could do LinkedIn native video. And it has been wildly popular and very successful at driving people to their feed and engagement within the feed. But recently they launched LinkedIn Live in a beta format. And I actually just interviewed Quentin Alums, who's one of the people that was part of that beta. And I'm going to be releasing that soon on Growth Experts. But, I think LinkedIn Live could be an extremely powerful, tool for LinkedIn and for salespeople and for anybody who's on LinkedIn, right?
So sort of the equivalent of Facebook Live.
It's very similar to Facebook Live, but it's going to have some differences, right? One thing, for example, and I'll let the cat out of the bag, is that it's not, initially at least, it's not going to be released to every user, even after the beta. Okay. And initially it's going to be a premium feature. So you're going to have to pay for an additional subscription in order to have it. Now that may change later. Okay. But based on the roadmap that they have right now, based upon some insight from Quentin and some other sources, is it's going to be kind of a pay to play application, which has pros and cons, right? The pros are it's going to kind of scrub the quality, hopefully a little bit. And you won't get a lot of those, hey, this is just a test to do LinkedIn Live messages in the feed, right? And hopefully it'll enhance the content. And hopefully it will increase the amount of good content that's out there, right? So LinkedIn Live, I think, it could be a very powerful feature. I don't have the beta. That, I wish I did, but it is what it is. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to be an early adopter of it. And I'm going to do a lot of testing, because I can tell you, I resisted Facebook Live for a while because live video is really interesting, right? It has its own whole set of challenges, live, right? Yes. We're recording this. You can edit it. There's some things you can do, but live has a whole different set of challenges. But I can tell you that live video on Facebook in the right context has been can be really powerful. So I think it could be, huge for sales and marketing in general on LinkedIn. Now, the jury's still out, but I think there's strong potential. The second thing, unless you want to comment on that, because there's 2 things I want to share.
I agree. I think that in the right hands, it'll be a great tool. Yeah.
Yes. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of liked the fact that they're going to charge a premium for it. Because I think it's going to help qualify that a little bit. Some people might not like that. Hey, I shouldn't have to pay to have this feature. Well, I don't know. I mean, I in some ways I kind of like that. I don't mind paying because I know how I would leverage it, right? And I know it's not going to just be some random off the cuff garbage content.
And I have to admit, I don't hear nearly as much about Facebook Live, and I don't see nearly as many people using it as I thought I was going to see, or even as I saw initially when it first came out. So
yeah,
I think the same thing will be true here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because people are apprehensive to get on live video. Trust me, it's a scary proposition for the average person. I know it was for me the first time. You just got to let go of those inhibitions, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the second part that I think is going to really come to the forefront, and has already started to come to the forefront, is rather than a focus on virality and reach, right, which is what the conversations, a lot of the conversations are around right now. You hear people mad because they're getting less views and they're getting less engagement. Right. And that's true of social media in general, right? That's not just LinkedIn, right? That's social media in general. What the conversation is going to gear towards is it's going to gear towards engagement, right? But what I mean by engagement is engagement with your engagers. So for example, inside of the post itself, rather than you just putting content out there and then letting people comment on it where it's like a TV show, right? It's one way. And then, they get to reply back, but you never reply to them. I think a lot of the power of that relationship building and that building rapport is when you, as a salesperson or a marketer, actually engages within the posts themselves. Now, the hard part about this, and I know the challenge.
So give an example, more concrete.
Well, let me give you an example. So if I were to post a video about, how to generate leads with LinkedIn, just a hypothetical, right? How to generate 3 ways to generate leads with LinkedIn. And that's something that is highly targeted to my target market. It's going to be attracting the people that are really interested in that. And they start engaging within the content and they start asking questions, or they start commenting, or they just, they make an observation and they put a comment in there. What happens is a lot of times those comments go unanswered. I'd say the heavy majority of time, comments go unanswered. And so what you as the salesperson or the marketer can do or needs to do is to really try to engage with those people, at least the people that are part of your target market and the ones that have some sort of meaningful content, right? If they just say cool, well then, it may not require you to engage with them, but ultimately that concept of engagement within the social media format, not just one way, but 2 ways. So you as the creator needs to engage back. How many times have you replied to a blog post in the comments and never heard anything back?
Sure.
How did that make you feel?
It didn't do anything for me, but that's okay. But
I
understand what you're saying.
For the average person, if they asked a question in the comments of a blog post and nobody ever replied,
no, it's like
that kind of makes me feel shitty, right? Because it says you put this out here, you compelled me even by putting the comments there to ask you a question or provide feedback, and you never even took the time to reply back to me. So to me, our relationship got worse, not better, right? Because
it's like not following up on a sales lead.
That's right. It's like not following up on a sales lead. I submitted a request to get pricing and information on XYZ product, and it took 3 months to get back to me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to wait for you. Right. And so I think LinkedIn and other social media, I think a big focus should be, and is starting to be, more engagement, a focus on quality engagement within those conversations versus just the overall reach and virality of those posts. Right.
Yeah. And I would use based on what you're saying, I would use the term interaction.
Yeah. Interaction. True. That's a good point.
Because they're going to put a premium on interaction.
Interaction and engagement within the actual content themselves. Yeah. So who cares if you get 10,000 views to your post, but you don't generate any relationships that convert offline with your prospects or with your target market? I'd rather get 500 views and two opportunities, right? Where I can convert those conversations offline, or at least get some sort of a dialogue, or maybe make a new connection. I don't care about views. I really don't care about views. I could care less about virality and views. The conversations these days are all around that. And I think the secret is to have interaction within that content. And that's what will drive that know, like, and trust and create opportunity, more opportunities than any virality is going to create for you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100% on that.
So I think those are the two big things I would point to, the LinkedIn Live and then a focus on interaction within the content to try to drive that relationship and move it forward.
Right, which really speaks to what we were talking about initially in the conversation, which is the responsibility of individual sellers, individual contributors to have a content strategy, even if it's just curating, right? Because you're not going to get any engagement unless you're sharing something. And so sharing interaction, if you're using LinkedIn, has to become a critical part of it. Again, otherwise you're just spamming people and as I say, you're not selling, you're playing the odds, and that's not going to get you
hope
very
is
far.
not a winning strategy, right? In any game, particularly in sales and marketing. So if you think just throwing, a bunch of random connections out and messages and even random content, you will be reinforced by getting an occasional lead or client here and there, but you'll never have a predictable and sustainable source of leads or contacts or connections or sales.
Right, which gets back to the first point, which is take the long-term view of the network you're building and the value it has for you, again, over the duration of your career, and you'll continue to build on that, but you have to be providing value to that network. If you just have connections and you're not helping them in any way, there's not much value. No one perceives you as being of value.
Yeah, 100%. And there's one more point I want to make, and this is, I got this question just the other day, and so I think it's relevant. They're like, well, listen, what type of content should I be creating, right? What type of content should I be creating? And I say, my theory is, even though I do LinkedIn consulting and coaching and training, the majority of my content, and you can attest to this, 80% of my content doesn't directly talk about LinkedIn lead generation or social selling, right? But a lot of that content is relevant to my target market. So if my target market is consultants and B2B entrepreneurs, right? So there's a lot of different things that those people are interested in. So I'm using that to attract the audience and to develop some relationship with them, but it doesn't always have to be around my product or service.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. And people think that that's the case. They think that they constantly have to be talking about, listen, if all I posted on was LinkedIn every single day, you would get burned out in hearing from me. It happens. You get that, it's almost like you're like, oh my God, not again. Right. But if I vary my content in the type of content, the style of content, whether that be images, videos, text-based or otherwise, and I create some variation, but I focus on topics that are interested to my target market, I would tell you that that's my approach, is to try to vary the content in the topic and in the style. And for me, it works well.
Yeah, and I would just add to that is, because it could trigger a longer conversation, but one that I've had with multiple people and I write about, is to do what Dennis is talking about, is you have to be interested in something other than just sales or what you're doing, right? So what else are you interested in? What else do you want to learn about? What else have you learned about that you might maybe want to share with people? Is the broader you are, the more attractive you're going to be to people. Potentially they'll become your customers. And you have a favorite quote or saying, it comes from British philosopher Thomas Huxley. People who listen to my show are probably tired of hearing it, but his philosophy, and I found this early in my career, and I've lived my career by it, is that, in life you should try to learn something about everything and everything about something. And it's the something about everything that makes you interesting. Yeah,
absolutely. No question. The people that win on Jeopardy, and just to make I was watching Jeopardy the other night, are the people that are the most well-read, right? And the people that have the widest and broadest experience, right? It's not the people that are super narrow. They're not there's advantages to being niche, right? But when you're talking about creating content and conversations and relationships, the broader you are and the deeper you are in those channels, the better off you'll be. I remember you shared that with me in our first conversation. I think you shared that with me in our podcast.
Yeah. So very important. All right, Dennis, we've run out of time.
Totally agree.
Fantastic conversation. So tell people where they can get hold of you.
Yeah, great. Well, listen, appreciate it. If you guys I put together kind of a little gift for you guys. If you're interested in learning how to generate inbound leads with LinkedIn, kind of like some of the strategy I talked about, I put together a guide. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Generating Inbound Leads with LinkedIn. Catchy phrase, right? So you can get that for free at askdennisbrown.com/guide. That's just askdennisbrown.com/guide. feel free to connect with me on any of the social channels, particularly LinkedIn at Ask Dennis Brown. And if I can help you guys in any way, just reach out and let me know you heard from me in Paul's show. And I appreciate you having me, Paul.
All right. Dennis, thank you very much.
All right, Andy, thank you. And Andy, I'm sorry. I'm thinking Paul, my friend, one of my good friends. Thank you, Andy. I really appreciate it.
Either one works. Yeah, I've gone through my whole life with 2 first names. I respond to both. So.
I appreciate it, Andy. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Dennis, thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for this week. First of all, as always, I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to thank my guest, Dennis Brown. Join me again next week as my guest will be Doug Winter. Doug is the founder and CEO of Seismic, based right here in my favorite city, America's finest city, San Diego. And we're going to be talking about the impact of sales enablement on sellers and buyers. And as always, we're going to get a little bit off track and have a deep conversation about how to really elevate sales productivity. So you'll definitely want to check that out. And be sure to join us then. So before you go, don't forget to visit us at thesaleshouse.com, the sales performance accelerator for B2B sellers, just like you. That is thesaleshouse.com. And thanks again for joining me. So until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. RingDNA is the leading sales enablement platform that uses AI to help scale business growth. Trusted by the top companies across the globe, RingDNA offers a suite of powerful tools for every sales role. The RingDNA Dialer radically improves sales productivity and call connection rates, while guided selling helps reps know exactly what to do and when to do it. Conversation AI uses artificial intelligence to surface the most impactful coaching opportunities in real time. So, no matter where your team is working from, the RingDNA platform can help them exponentially increase call connections, opportunities, and revenue. Learn more at ringdna.com/platform. That's ringdna.com/platform.